Hello everyone, welcome to vlog number 2 for this Music, Culture and Performance Strand 5, National Movements and so on. And I wanted to use this vlog as a way of just going over what we talked about last week, but also looking forward to this week and starting to talk about assignments and how I can help you towards that. First of all, I've been talking about tutorials and that these are available to you. Please do sign up. They're now on the Moodle page. So if you go to Moodle, you should find in your class list, your list of different classes that you do on Moodle. There's now a new class that you can do, which is called Chris Worsley Tutorials. And if you click in there, you will find the sign up sheets for my tutorials, which will be happening from this Friday. And I'm going to be setting those up to happen every week of term. That time is there, so please do use it. There's only a short session for that this week because I'm having to head off down to London after in the evening so I'm working over the weekend. But please do use that time to come along. As I said, you can talk about stuff that's in the lectures and just bring along any questions you have. Come along with a friend if you've got questions between you and we can talk about stuff. Bring your own repertoire along to talk about and anything like that. And if you've got any questions about the assignment, of course, please, that's the place to do it. Just bring everything along and talk to me. I want to know about you. I want to know what makes you tick, and I want to have a good musical conversation with you. I'm in a room with a piano, so if you want to bring anything along to play along with me, then that's always great to do, and yeah, be a lot of fun. Please do come along. Okay. Now, we talked last week about this idea of the voice in 19th century music becoming a really important feature. We've talked about this idea, and I mentioned it again in the last vlog number 1, about the 18th century idea of man as a machine, as just a mechanical beast, a mechanical being. And the questions that were being asked about human beings, can we simply just be understood as mechanical beings, or was there something more to our humanity? And the 19th century romantic view came that, well, what is it that a human can do that a mechanical being cannot do? And the big answer to that question is that a mechanical being cannot talk. Certainly not in the 19th century. No one had ever taught a mechanical being to speak. That's a uniquely human thing. But by being able to talk, it means that we could actually reason. We could take in things from the outside world through our senses, process them in our minds, make some sense of them, and then talk about them. And that implies reasoning. That reasoning is a very human endeavour, a very human ability. And from that, the voice of that reason, the voice of expression, became a symbol of our humanity. And it's that voice, that singing voice, that begins to start to characterize 19th century music. We get singing voices in Bach, we get singing voices in Mozart and Haydn, but really once you get to those long melodic lines of the 19th century, and we think of not just Beethoven earlier on, but getting to Berlioz, getting into Puccini, into Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, those great big long melodic lines, Elgar, of course, that singing voice becomes such an expressive feature, not only within the genre of well, in different vocal genre, but actually within instrumental music. It's such a characteristic of that music, leading from the body and the dance styles of the 18th century into the sense of reason, not beyond the mechanics of movement, but to reason and expressing emotions through the voice. That's something which is uniquely human. So we talked about that element, and I got on to the end to talking very briefly, about Brahms, and particularly Schoenberg's interpretation of Brahms. So what I decided to do this next week, I'm going to start by going over some of that material of Brahms and Schoenberg's interpretation, because it really is fascinating stuff. If you've never read Schoenberg before, we've all heard some of his music, and we will have mixed opinions probably about some of his music. I'd urge you to read some of Schoenberg's writings. because they are fascinating. It's a book which, when I first discovered it when I was an undergraduate student, his collected writings, it's called Style and Idea. It's an absolutely fascinating mind at work, talking with an immeasurable knowledge of the history of music and actually just the understanding of how music works. And going through his interpretations of Brahms's music and remembering that actually he was the first person who really truly recognised Brahms as being a figure of such historical importance with which he's understood to be today. That's a really key idea. So I'm going to start with that because I rushed over it a bit at the end of last week's class and go into that in a little bit more detail. And to deal with the idea, which certainly Brahms dealt with later in his life, of the musical fragment in 19th century music. And this takes us into quite an interesting area of music, because we're talking about short pieces of music, and we're talking in particular about domestic music, which this is not music for the concert hall, for the opera house, for great big, symphony orchestras. This is works of chamber music. This is works for just one or two instruments, and music that would be performed in the home. And who is it that's writing this music? Well, of course, so many, Brahms, Mendelssohn, we can think of many composers who were using this, Schumann, but also the domestic scene in music, which is so important for female musicians, not just female performing artists, but female composers we're going to talk about quite a lot this week, and really looking at the unique position in music history that female composers had, because of course this is a topic which has not been dealt with, certainly within the 19th century, was not given the priority in discussions that it really should have been. And once you start to get into that history and look beyond the history books, look at the music itself, you find there's a fantastic range of music by women composers, which actually tells us a great deal about musical society in general. It's not simply trying to rewrite the history books and skew it in a certain way to be more woken up to perhaps how things should have been, but really it teaches us important historical lessons about the music scene that we all should really know about. So that's really important. So that I'm going to be looking at this next Friday. A little word about assignments. A couple of people have been asking me just about the recording assignment for November the 22nd. And if you've got a hope, most of you will have a good idea of the piece of music perhaps that you might want to write about. Some people have been asking me, does it have to be a whole recording? If I'm talking about a Strauss tone poem or even just a song cycle, do I have to talk about the whole thing in such a short word count? No, you don't. You can give a general introduction to the whole thing, but actually if you just want to focus your musical criticism on just a small part of the recording, that's absolutely fine. But how do you choose the recording itself? Well, let me make it a bit easy for you. You can choose anything. Does it have to be historically informed performance? It can be. It doesn't have to be. If you've got a recording which you think is just in quite a modern style and is actually historically quite uninformed, is actually quite unstylistic, that works really well as well. There are two main questions which perhaps you should be asking yourself in trying to get into the recording. One is, what are the elements of music that performer is seeking to dramatise within the music? And when you listen to the recording, therefore, what are the elements that really are dramatised for you? What are the things that you hear in the music, the stylistic elements that really hit you in the face? As you know, listening to two recordings of the same piece of music, it can easily be two completely different approaches which are taken, two completely different elements of the music which hit you. So that can be a nice way to start, thinking what are the elements of music which are dramatised most prominently within a particular recording. And the second question is, once you've understood that, what tradition does that performance fit into? Does it fit into a tradition of historically informed performance? Does it fit into a tradition where history is completely rejected, which is a style which was often taken in the 1960s, 1970s, and often even today is chiefly the mainstay of performers who grew up in that era and really put history behind them? Or is it something which fits a more modern tradition of performance practice, and you can relate it to other traditions? You might look at other things that particular artist has done and how it fits with that tradition, or other people who have recorded that particular piece of music or similar repertoire in a similar way. See if you can really place that recording within a tradition, a larger tradition, a wider tradition, so that you can get behind the performer's eyes, get inside their mind and think, well, really, what is it that they're trying to express with this? The approach might be something which you might simply like. It might hopefully really make you think about the piece of music and think, why have they done that? Why have they chosen to do this in a particular way? It makes the piece of music sound completely unlike the way that anyone else does it. And use that as an opportunity to try and think, well, how are they thinking about this piece? And get behind that thinking to see what sort of tradition they are a part of. That can be a really interesting thing where you start to perhaps approach elements of a recording that perhaps you don't like or perhaps you don't understand, and really try to understand them, really try to see, okay, well, maybe I don't like it, or maybe I do like it, but what is it that the performer's really trying to do that at least you can understand and can rationalise and justify that particular type of recording in? And it's that sort of question that enlarges your knowledge and takes you outside of your comfort zone. And of course, when we go outside of our comfort zones, we learn all sorts of other things that we perhaps can benefit from, that our imaginations just working alone wouldn't take ourselves to. So it's a really interesting, really useful exercise to do. We'll start talking about this more on Friday when we talk about musical fragments. I hope many of you will come and sign up to my tutorials. If not this week, then in future weeks. They will run every week that there is a class from now on. So please do come along and talk about those. Have a great week, and I will see you on Friday for the next class. Thank you very much. Bye for now.